So it's basically North England all round. So two of the things dearest to me, the north of England and how we end violence against women and girls. I think that's a good evening discussion. So I think the numbers have stopped ever so slightly, so we'll see if they keep going up. So if we can switch to a normal view now, please, that's brilliant. So you should be able to see all three lovely faces, well, two lovely faces and me. So I'm going to introduce you to my two colleagues here in a moment. My name's Tabitha Morton. I'm one of the deputy leaders at the Women's Equality Party. And my passion at the Women's Equality Party is obviously equality for all women, but I believe that we have to end violence against all women before we get that. In a minute, I'm going to get these two women to introduce themselves, but one is Sonia Gell from Hull Sisters, and you're going to be hearing a lot about them and what they're doing. And Sinead Cregan from Inspire North, who are a fantastic organisation that work across the north of England, doing all sorts from mental health to women's refuges. But I won't steal Sinead's thunder. I'll let her speak in a minute. So why are we talking about this tonight? Why are we spending, an hour of your time? Why have we got these organisations who are incredibly busy delivering services? Why are we taking an hour of their time up? Well, we are living through a health pandemic, and what this health pandemic has revealed to many in this country is what many on this call already know, that there's a pandemic of violence against women and girls in this country and globally. And we really need to make sure that we end this. Just to give you some of the facts, the National Helpline for Domestic Violence, the calls were up 50% in this last year. At one point, there was 4 women a week were losing their lives. This is set against a backdrop of the refuge spaces, the services that we have in this country have been cut back over 5, 10, 15 years. So we don't have enough services to start with, but with the pressure of COVID, the pressure of people being locked in their homes with their perpetrators, it's become even more dangerous. So what we're going to do tonight is, it's a very, very gloomy picture, and it's also a life-threatening picture. So what are we going to do about that? Well, we have to understand, first off, that women are not one homogenous group. We have to make sure there are services for all of the different women and all of us out there. For example, we continue to commission BAME services in this country. There is no such thing as a BAME woman. There is Black women, there's Black women from different African countries, there is Southeast Asian women, there's East Asian women, there's women from all over the country who are the global ethnic majority. We've got to stop thinking of them as just this one acronym of BAME. Only 10% of refuge spaces in this country are accessible. So what happens to our disabled sisters and our sisters who have access problems? There is only 6 services across the UK that are for LGBT plus survivors. So again, what happens there? And one of the things that I feel, and I think Sinead feels quite passionate about as well, is that we do not commission mental health services to help survivors to rebuild their lives across the country. So it's so much of a postcode lottery as to whether they get that. Those women who have unsure migrant status, they don't have access to public funds, so they don't even get to access these services at all. And this year we saw the domestic violence bill finally making its way through Parliament, but there were so many missed opportunities there. We could have had statutory funding for all services in there, and that was missed. And we could have thrown away this archaic rule that women with unstable migrant status can't access public funds, so can't access refuges. But what I want to talk about tonight is that violence is not inevitable, and it's not a woman's problem. It's a societal problem, and this violence is holding back 51% of our country. But it is also paving the way for our young people to grow up and think that that's the way society is and that's the way families are. So we need to unpick this together, because I think, and I know I can see nodding from my colleagues here, so I know my colleagues feel exactly the same, that we won't get true equality until we end violence against women and girls. So we know that this is a subject that's close to many of our hearts, and many of us have also experienced some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. So my colleague Jess will be popping some of the national helplines in the chat box. We ask that any chat that's happening in the chat box be respectful and inclusive, and to understand that everyone is in a different place and a journey with this understanding. And if you have got any sort of concerns, please contact us directly. So without further ado, let's get the conversation started. So first off, I've had a little bit of time to introduce myself and the Women's Equality Party. But maybe Sinead, we started talking back in the summer, didn't we? And you were telling me about some of the fantastic things that you've been doing with your organisation. You have two of the organisations, partly is a women's refuge, but also a perpetrator programme. Could you tell the audience a little bit about sort of what Inspire North do?
Yeah, thanks very much for that introduction. So I'm Sinead Cregan, and I'm the Director of Development and Innovation at Inspire North, and that is the parent group for Community Links and Foundation. And we provide mental health services, domestic abuse, perpetrator and housing services across the north of England. And many of our contracts are with local authorities and some of the CCGs. And as you say rightly, we started talking in the summer, and that was after I was in the audience for the first webinar and conversation that you did in the south of England. And I remember watching that and feeling, well, we've got to do that in the north of England. So I remember I sent a tweet straight to the leader of the party, to Mandu, and said, come on, what about the north of England? And here we are. So I'm absolutely delighted, you know, that we're having this session tonight. So from our perspective at Inspire North, we have been running a No Excuse for Abuse campaign just before lockdown started, because we immediately, as soon as we heard there was potential for a national lockdown, immediately were concerned what would happen to domestic abuse and to women being locked down with their perpetrator. I mean, it was an absolute cauldron. It was like almost a gift to abusers, and that really worried us. So we set up the No Excuse for Abuse campaign, and we have been running that all the way through lockdown and trying to get messages out to women, particularly that how to get support, where to get support, and so that they could feel that there was some way or another that they actually could break away from what was going on. But and we'll talk about this in a while. My other kind of passion around this is that the violence has got to stop. There is just no excuse for the abuse to be taking place, and it's got no place. It's not a solution. And I suppose just to finish is that, you know, I grew up, you will hear from my accent, I'm not from England, I'm from Northern Ireland. I grew up in West Belfast in the height of the Troubles, in the height of the violence. So I really have seen, I suppose, what violence and hatred does to a society. Yeah. And it's about what we then, how do we address that, and particularly around domestic abuse. Yeah. So I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sinead. And Sonia, if you could just sort of say a few words about Hull Sisters, because I know you're working first-hand experience of many of the women I've just been talking about who don't have recourse to public funds, and also have experienced extreme racism during COVID as well. Could you just share some thoughts about what you do?
We work with a large number of women and girls and children from Black and ethnic minority background who suffer violence, abuse, female genital mutilation, poor health, poor communication, racism, and discrimination. So the women who come to us, they are generally isolated from the mainstream society, case of low confidence, have no awareness about access to services. And even if they have got some access to services, services mistreated them or don't understand them because of their cultural, needs, and different haven't been catered for, and that's why they lose that trust on the services. And there is a big gap between Black and ethnic minority women and the mainstream people, the wider community. So when during this lockdown, or women from Black and ethnic minority background, they become doubly deprived. Number one, because they already had no access to services. And on the top, when COVID happened, all the services being closed. So, and because they've been digitally excluded, they don't have digital knowledge, no IT, no good communication skill. And then immigration problem is a big problem. Some of them, they lost their immigration status. And some of them, they were already on asylum. They were getting some money from NAS, National Asylum Support Services, but that being stopped due to some technical reason or whatever reason. So they've been just relying on charity. The charity was so, our non-profit organization was so much overstretched with limit that we couldn't, cope with large number of women and children. And then because there were no services available for these women and children, we are the only one minority organization, Black and ethnic minority organization, predominantly working with them in Hull area. But the sad thing is that we don't receive any support from the council. Even during lockdown, we lost our building. We just been requesting and requesting and requesting, and the media was showing everything for us. But still, till date, the council didn't come up with any kind of support or anything to us. So really abundant.
Yeah, and so that you can see, like, you're an essential lifeline for these women, but you're not getting the commissioning and the services locally. I'd like to just sort of talk for a little bit about, because we hear, those of us who work in the sector, we talk about specialist services, and for people who don't work in the sector, they might not sort of that might not bring them to life. So if I can just come back to you, Sinead, if you think about a woman who and her children maybe who access a refuge, what's the sort of service that you're providing there, and how does it help a woman to rebuild her life?
Excuse me. I think we're really fortunate that the refuge that we provide is a purpose-built, really modern, very secure building in the northeast, and we can accommodate 12 women and their children. And there's not every refuge accepts children, so I think we are quite unique in that sense. And we can accommodate women with, large numbers of children. We've had a family with a woman who's got, 7 children, 5 children, but we can accommodate them very safely. And we're fortunate that we do have, I have to say, amazing support from our commissioners. And I think if they really see the value in what we do and what we provide, and how we really work and support women to make that change, to feel it actually, I think one of the things that some of the women have said to me, that we help them feel hopeful again, and we can support them to really move through and away from what's been happening for them. And I think the important thing too for us is that women that we support will go back to their abuser, and they will come and stay with us several times before they actually leave permanently. And when they're ready to take that step, then we will support them. We've got a whole group work program. We've got Children in Need funding for a support worker to support the children so they can have therapy and counselling. And we really work with the women to rehouse them and to also make sure that they get ongoing support. Yeah. But the thing is, we cannot cope with the demand. We will probably work with maybe a third of our referrals, and that's what I say. We've got a fantastic relationship with our commissioners, but there's no money. They haven't got, through lockdown, our IDFA referrals went through the roof. Yeah. And we had to look at how we secure, additional resource to be able to take the referrals that were coming mostly from the police. Yeah. Because I think the reality for us is the town where we have our refuge has got a population of 136,000, And at one point, the police were responding to 15 domestic abuse incidents per day. And that's sort of small, small population. So we really try to support the women as much as we can and to look after the children. Last summer we had something like 27 children in the refuge. But we try and, I think one of the things that always struck me from our service managers, she said they really try to create some normality, some joy, some really positive experiences for the children, as well as obviously for their mothers. But for the children, for us too, that's really important. And plus, we also do have a perpetrator program.
Yeah, let's pick
and we'll hold on to that.
Yeah, let's pick up on that in a second, because I'm keen to. I think it's a perfect example on this in this virtual meeting room today about the postcode lottery, about how commissioners deal and commission services. And also, I think we need to call it for what it is as well, that we do have structural racism in this country. So, certain services that are presented by certain women are seen differently. It is what we're dealing with. And Sonia, I'm just interested in, I know a lot of evidence was given to Parliament early on in COVID about how services like yours were really the place that women went to first. Many women Black and minoritized women would not necessarily go to the statutory services, so they wouldn't go to the police, they wouldn't go to the social workers, because they were worried about what would happen. Can you sort of give us some examples of how you've been able to work with women and really advocate for them when they sort of didn't know where to turn?
I have hundreds and hundreds of examples of racism and discrimination with our women, generally with women, but like women with Black and ethnic minority in particular. Because what happens, the services we have got in Hull, they if they don't see a woman, if they don't see that the woman is not agree to whatever they are deciding for her, and she has got her own say, which she has got the right to say, they would all get united and will punish the woman. So this thing is ongoing, and it's happening and happening until somebody come, and intervene, like from the high level, which it doesn't work, because even if we have got counselors here, they want to please the services and they don't want to go against them. So the poor woman, she is already facing violence and abuse from her husband or intimate partner, and on the top from the services as well. So when they go to women refuge or any temporary women hostels or anywhere, the council services where they put them, the workers from those hostels are abusing her. So it's not one time, it's so many times. Recently, we had a case which we brought in Hull Daily Mail, and it's on or Twitter as well. The lady has been on the council housing list for the last 12 years. She has got 5 children and 1 autistic child, 4 years old. The autistic child is so difficult to control. He screams, he takes off his clothes, and he's not able to, very much behave like, normal children. So the mom, but he has got very much attachment with the mom, as the children do. So the woman was so much exhausted, and she said that she is in a temporary accommodation. The council put her in a temporary accommodation because the council thought she has made herself intentionally homeless while she been in the waiting list for the last 12 years. And her house, the private accommodation where she was living for so many years, it was all damp. She was begging the services, one place, another place, telling them, look, my house is damp. It's this and that. And because they have poor communication skill, they cannot express themselves. So they were using neighbors, teachers, nursery workers, these people to communicate on their behalf. So she lost her tenancy, and then she went to the council to help. The council put her in a flat, a temporary flat. But then within 2-3 weeks, the council asked her to leave and said that you have made yourself intentionally homeless, and that's why you go and find out a private renting accommodation for yourself, and they cannot help anymore. and close the case, and that's it. So the poor woman, the children were feeling suicidal because the children grow up in this society and they think they have the same rights like other children have got. So, but it doesn't, happen here. So the children, they wanted to jump off Humber Bridge. So the whole night, in fact, the whole weeks, we've been mobile with her, calming her down and working with her, because the social services were threatening the mom that their children will be taken away by them if she's not going and finding a house for herself. She said, this is the lockdown time. We don't have any house here. Where will she go and find out a house? So the whole pressure was on the mom. So the mom was exhausted, and mom was telling that if you're taking my children away from him, they're going to take their life. She will also kill herself and jump off the Humber Bridge, because if the children are not there, what will she do without children? So all these things were happening, and it was just so much. When we spoke to social services, and we explained that it shouldn't be the case, many things we had, and the social services, they said, okay, they will find a temporary accommodation for her. But then they find one room, small room. Yeah. So many children.
It's just going round in circles, yeah.
That's it. And then we said, how can you put them in one room with so much luggage, for the children? And so the young children, I agree with you, because they grow up in hate. So we have Black and ethnic minority children, they don't see the same rights. Yeah. So they grow up in hate, and the same white children as well. So this hate display itself in various forms. Yes. Whether crime, whether abuse, whatever name you give them, it shows itself.
It does. It really does. I think the one of the children's charities did some research. It's a couple of years old now, but it is estimated that 1 in 8 children in this country are growing up seeing domestic violence. So you're absolutely right, Sonia, that there's so many layers to that particular case, and I appreciate it's a very startling story that we've just shared, but that's the reality of that woman's life. And it just brings me, I suppose, to the sort of the next piece we wanted to talk about was at the Women's Equality Party. We've campaigned long and hard to make sure that all children receive relationship and sex education in schools. And finally this year, those state schools, so those that the government can make it compulsory, will receive that. We also think that it needs to be LGBT inclusive as well, to understand that there are different types of relationships and different types of identity. But that's only one end of it, isn't it? That's and that also doesn't tackle what you've been talking about, Sonia, which is the racism and the structural racism that we've got. But I'm just interested to hear from you, Sinead, before we sort of come back around to that. We don't often, at the Women's Equality Party, again, we support perpetrator programs, because we think that you have to deal with the problem at both ends. And it's the men and the boys generally that we need to change, not the women. The women aren't doing anything wrong, sorry. But there's a lot of different perpetrator programs out there. I'm horrified often to hear of month-long perpetrator programs. Can you tell us a little bit about the program that you run, and sort of, especially in a COVID situation, what you've seen? Has it died off? Is it picked up? What's happening there?
So yeah, we run it's a perpetrator program, but it's a group work program. So it's very much around, and I think this is where it's really effective, because I think when you have anything that is about either mutual support or mutual challenging of each other, I think that's much more powerful, because it doesn't let people off the hook for their appalling behaviour. So I think to have perpetrators challenging perpetrators is really important. So we run a group work program, and it lasts 26 weeks. So, it's an intensive program, and you have to, you must complete the whole session. And most of our referrals come through the police. And we've been really fortunate that contract has been extended financially. So we've been given further funding to extend the reach of that program, to allow us to accept more referrals and to do more work. And certainly, of course, like everything, COVID interferes. Lockdown hasn't helped, so we have moved a lot of our support and work to the digital world. And in some ways, we're finding that some folk have engaged more so through the digital platforms that we use, because in some ways it's easier not to necessarily be in the room, but you can still have the same impact.
Okay.
So we've been sort of looking at, making sure that we're still doing the work that we're commissioned to provide, but having to find creative ways to do so. And I think for me, it's really interesting, that we're a large group that provide many services, and it's really interesting, the fact that we have the refuge, but we also have the perpetrator, and I think that's a really good balance, because we can really understand all of the dynamics, and that provides an opportunity, I think, for other changes to take place within our group structure of organizations. And I think for me, my passion, as I said at the start, is definitely about challenging the perpetrators, challenging our society. You're talking about the work that can now take place in schools, but I think it's about talking about healthy relationships, and very much talking to young boys and young teenagers who might see an abusive parent, and it's about helping them to understand, well, it doesn't have to be like that. We need to stop that happening, and so that we can have an impact and help young boys and men to have healthy relationships with whomever they choose to do that with. But I think we've got, as a society, I think there's so little challenge that takes place around abusers, because so many times we hear it's a woman who's fled, she's left with the children, etc., etc., and oftentimes the perpetrator remains in the family home. And that, to me, is just not acceptable. It has to be about consequences around the violence. And I think what's worth mentioning too is not to forget, we're not just talking about the violence, we're also talking about coercive control.
Absolutely.
And we know the absolute dangers, and how many women have taken their own lives because of coercive control and that manipulation. So I think I just want to make sure that we don't forget that, because I think it's really important, and I think that's much more hidden. And I don't think we really fully understand the scale of the problem around coercive control.
Yeah, I mean, it's only been in law for a few years now that it's something that we can prosecute in this country. I say it's in law. We know the prosecution rates in this country are so low. But that's an interesting point, Sonia. You mentioned earlier that so Sinead said that her program has been able to connect with people digitally, but you were saying that was one of the challenges for you, because. So do you see a lot of sort of the women that you're looking after and supporting are sort of very locked down physically, as in that you can't actually reach them? And how do you go about that?
Because the women we are dealing with have completely different culture, and different needs. The lockdown has curtailed their freedom doubly, just because they are already curtailed in terms of freedom. Can I say coercive control is there, from the culture, from the society. They are relying on their male counterparts for livelihood. The income is coming from their partners, and if there is the welfare benefit, if they are on welfare benefit, the partner is the one who is controlling all the money. So they don't know even how to operate their card in the bank. So we teach them all these things. But during lockdown, we have outreach surveys. So we were going door to door to our women who are already registered with us. But then, like I said, the woman is not just one woman with one problem. It's a package of problems, when they go there. So they will talk about their children problems, because the children bullying and harassment in school is so common. And the discrimination with the little children are so common from the teachers that it was just so many complaints were coming from the school. And so we were speaking to school, the GP appointments because they cannot speak English. So they could not even find how to speak to the GP surgeries. Normally when they speak, they say, what language do you speak? They don't understand. So we were speaking on their behalf, and then the interpreters were so low with the GP services, on all the services, because of the lockdown, that we were the one just running around everywhere. But because we already lost our building, we had no building, the council is not helping us, and then on the top, we had limited resources in terms of funding, because in Hull, if one is from Black and ethnic minority background, then they should not even think that they will get a handsome amount of funding, you know, from the council or anywhere. Just because we don't, this is fact, we don't get any funding, and that's why we are all deprived. And to bring these changes in our women's life and to teach them about how to take control of their bodies and their lives, it's not an easy job, because if we don't have that resources to help and support those women, the services are not proactive to support them, how can we bring changes in their life? And then on the top, we don't have any BAME women's strategy in Hull. Hull City Council have done strategy. So if you don't have strategy, under the strategy, policy and plannings are coming, and funding. If they don't have, how? You tell us, you know, how?
Sonia, we didn't even practice this. Well, this leads me straight on to, I'm going to introduce our third guest of the evening, Kay Wesley, who will join us on the screen now. And I think the answer to one of the answers to this is to have women elected who centre this in everything that they do. So Kay Wesley, who's just joined us, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know you've ran from council meeting to be here this evening.
Yes.
I do appreciate that. Kay was one of our first elected councillors in Congleton, which we have renamed the Feminist Republic of Congleton. So yeah, that's I don't know whether you've got the actual the street names changed yet, Kay, but you're working on that. So why I invited Kay along is I just want to hand over to Kay just to share for 5 minutes. You know, since you've been elected, Kay, some of the things that you've managed to achieve and the focus, because you've listened to what we've been talking about tonight. You know, commissioning across the country is very patchy. Somewhere it's good, and it's very dependent on the relationships you've got. Then we've got structural racism and discrimination in our systems as well. So over to you, Kay, if you can just share some of sort of the successes that you've had.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and thanks very much. It was very interesting listening to the discussion so far. Now, of course, I'm a town councillor, and town and parish councils don't themselves provide these services, but I've discovered that you can get an awful lot done if you join the dots between various different players in your local area. And one, I think the most important thing that's happened since I was elected, that really I've made to happen in my own council, is that domestic abuse and domestic violence have become on the agenda. So I don't think these topics had ever been discussed before in the local council. I don't recall ever seeing it even in the local paper, except court cases. But now these things have come out from behind closed doors, because to your point right at the start, Tab, you said this is a community problem, it's a society problem, it's not an isolated incident. And I think really it was very much seen as an isolated incident. So the statistics are now out there. So every month now at council meetings, the police come and they report the statistics. They were previously reporting antisocial behaviour in the street and, you know, car crime and things. And I said, oi, why aren't we reporting domestic abuse crime in public? So now we've discovered there is an incident in Congleton every single day reported to the police. There are 2 sexual violence incidents outside the home every week. And, you know, this is not exceptional, as I'm sure you know who work in this space, but my council colleagues were really shocked and horrified, and a lot of members of the public have been, because they simply didn't know, because this is a crime that's behind closed doors, of course. So So that's been important, and I think, of course, we know only a small proportion is reported as well, so those statistics are important too. Another thing I did was I brought our local service provider, which is called Cheshire Without Abuse, who provide a great service. I brought them into council to give a presentation about the types of services they provide and the types of statistics in Congleton. They had 250 families a year they were supporting, and they have a wide range of some of the services you've been talking about, including services for very young children, so that we can catch them, families in early primary school and nursery. So they have this monkey bob program for young kids to talk about, are they scared, are they comfortable? And they have right through to perpetrators, and I think someone mentioned it's a long-term strategy with perpetrators, and they have perpetrator programs that really do work, and they've got really good evidence, and they have fantastic survivor programs. They have a sort of support to get back to work, support to get your life back, legal support, childcare support. They have all a kind of surround support for survivors to recover and escape. And they know, and they work very, very closely with the police here in Cheshire. They've got a brilliant relationship, and the police have changed their approach in Cheshire as a result of some of the work they've done with Cheshire Without Abuse. So the police have specially trained teams. They send specific officers into homes for specific call outs, and then those same officers follow through the next day and the next day, rather than coming back to a different police officer in the station to continue with a report. So the police have improved their services, and they become more joined up, and they're working hand in glove with Cheshire Without Abuse as service provider. And they all recognise, the best outcome is not always jail, it's not always family breakdown. There are many, these are very complex situations, and they deal with it in a complex way. So the big problem we had here in Congleton was that we didn't have any services in our town. So if you wanted to go to have a meeting at a domestic abuse hub or something like that to access some of those survivor services, you had to go to Macclesfield or Crewe, which are both 10 miles or more than 10 miles away. So obviously, if you're a parent, with a couple of kids, and you needed to get support, and you haven't got a car necessarily, you're hardly going to jump on the bus to Macclesfield, particularly if you're in crisis of some sort. So this was a big problem. So I had them come and present to council, and the council agreed that this was a problem and said, well, if we can find funding, then we're in support of having a service here in town, in Congleton. So, and the council agreed to provide one of our connected communities venues, one of our venues, to provide this. And working with Cheshire Without Abuse, I managed to secure some funding. It's not government funding, it's from the local trust. And we've been running a weekly, initially it was monthly, but then we managed to get some more funding, and now it's weekly domestic abuse clinic, so that people can turn up, and the police are there, and the counsellors from Cheshire Without Abuse are there, and they can get legal, financial, practical, any kind of advice. And they invite both survivors and potentially perpetrators as well, or potential perpetrators who might be worried about their own behaviour, to come and talk as well. And then we've done, as you mentioned, Sonia, we've done a load of stuff online, especially in the last 6 months. So the clinic has been partly online and partly face-to-face, and we've added a lot of content to the town council website called Staying Safe at Home. We have a whole section about where you can go and all the different support services that you can get. Another thing that we've done is we've started a white ribbon group in the town council, which is all about engaging men, of course. I think Sinead said at the start, the thing we have to do is change men's behaviour.
Yeah.
If we're going to stamp out abuse, we have to change the behaviour of men, boys, and young men as well. So white ribbon, that's what that's all about. So we started a white ribbon group, which is me and several male counsellors. And the White Ribbon Group is all about trying to call out sexist behaviour and misogyny, and change the behaviour of men and boys, of course, and improve outcomes. And as a result of that, we've had hundreds of people sign the White Ribbon Promise in Congleton. We've recently become a White Ribbon accredited town council, which means the White Ribbon flag is flying from the town hall as I speak for the 16 days. We've got white ribbons tied around all the lampposts with little stickers on. We're having a big town centre table this weekend, and all my White Ribbon ambassadors, who are all men, will come out and talk to people in the town about the behaviour change and about stamping out violence and abuse. So we're doing lots of things like that. We're doing lots of online social media. The town council has a social media takeover of white ribbon stuff. Several councillors attended a big white ribbon conference last week that was run by Cheshire Without Abuse, and they had different sections in it, and one of them was actually a perpetrator speaking, who I thought, and we had survivors speaking as well. So I thought that was really interesting, and that this particular perpetrator now runs sessions for other perpetrators, which was really interesting to hear from him. So we've been heavily involved in the white ribbon effort, and I think one of the great things I've seen is that the town councillors, and we've shared this with some of our WEP colleagues as well, who are now doing it with their own councils, trying to get them to do it. You don't have to be a councillor to take ideas to your council, obviously. So some of my WEP colleagues around the country are taking our materials to their own councils. And the great thing is we had quite a lot of naysayers in council at the start, particularly, some men, but also women, some more traditional, shall we say, councillors, not naming any particular political parties, but we had some people who said, oh, it's a bit sexist, this, what about the male victims, and what about this, and what about that, the usual, the sort of things you hear. Well, actually, we adopted as our white ribbon vision to stamp out all gender-based violence and abuse, which I'm fine doing. We're an inclusive council. We care about all victims and survivors, obviously. And in fact, Cheshire Police are themselves a white ribbon accredited organisation, and so is Cheshire Without Abuse. So we're all white ribbon accredited. We all say that. We all say we recognise men can be victims too. One of the people that's actually volunteered to stand in the cold this Saturday is one of the most prominent of those naysayers from a year ago, who was saying, oh, this is really sexist and I'm never going to support this. And now he's actually put his hand up, sent the email saying, can I come and help out on Saturday? And I'm thinking, yes, because they've realised that A, it's a good thing to do, and B, the public support it, and it gets a lot of, it gets a lot of good press out of it. And obviously it's been in the press and in the media quite a lot locally. So they're realising that actually talking about these things, and I think there was almost a feeling that it was kind of shameful admitting this happened in our town. We have our nice, it's a nice market town, Congleton. We had our nice hanging baskets and our pedestrianised area and our little makers market, and it was all very nice. And we were kind of ignoring this. And I said, the first meeting, I said, if someone was being attacked in the high street every day, what would you do? You would be absolutely outraged. But this is what's happening in somebody's house every day, So, and I think they kind of now get that, and they think it's actually, it's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of, that we're a white ribbon accredited town and that we're doing all these things. Sorry, that was a bit longer than 5 minutes.
Oh, well, I didn't want to stop you, because I think that just proves, I think, and why we wanted you to come along today, because these conversations can be, we talk about the problem all of the time, but what we've just shown there is actually the only reason that we haven't ended violence in the UK is political will. Mm-hmm. Look at what we've done in COVID. Look at how we suddenly can fund people to stay at home. Look at how we can turn huge places into hospitals within 24 hours. When we want to do something, there's a will to do it, and what you've just demonstrated there is that political will. Now, I don't want to take any more time up, because I know there's plenty of questions coming in as well, so can you stay with us, Kay, because sure. I've got a feeling there might be a couple of questions coming your way. Just while we're waiting for some of them, we had some pre-submitted ones which I've tried to work through as we've gone through. But one of them that's quite interesting here is, I often get asked this, so I'm really interested to hear from Sonia and Sinead what you think of this. What is the most helpful thing that, as ordinary members of the public, we can do to help combat violence against women and girls? So who wants to take that first?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, so Sinead, and then Sonia, we'll come to you.
I think one of the things that we've been saying through our No Excuse for Abuse campaign is don't ignore it. If you hear someone being abused who's your neighbour or lives next door or whatever, if it's safe, do something about it. Just don't ignore it, because so many people think, I don't want to hear it, but actually you could be saving someone from some really serious harm, potentially from being murdered within their own home. So one of the things we've been asking is for people not to ignore it, to actually, if it's safe to do so, to report it, to call the police, to get assistance. Because one of our support workers at our refuge, she's a survivor of domestic abuse, and it was just one call and support from a police officer that made a huge difference to her. You know, she's actually alive to tell the story. So for me, it's about, please don't ignore it.
Yeah.
And talk to people. You know, if you haven't seen someone for a while, or if you get an opportunity, you know, to just try and drop them a message, or just check in with people if you suddenly think, haven't seen so and so for a while. So for me, there's a bit of about a collective consciousness around this. To take some responsibility too. You know, that so many times you'll hear, well, I don't want to get involved. It doesn't happen around here. But yet, if you hear someone being battered next door to you, well, don't ignore it. Do something about it. So for me, it's about also raising awareness that, like, I think, Kay, like you were saying, suddenly you've opened the doors, you've opened people's eyes to what's going on. And I think there's someone that taking that responsibility and being challenging if you can, if it's safe to do so.
So, Sonia, I often hear, especially around women who may be survivors of FGM, there's a cultural sensitivity. You know, that seems to add another layer on, where people feel that they can't say anything. What would be your response to people who say, oh, I need to stay out of that? What would you say?
Yeah. First of all, you know, I'll answer your question, but I'm so happy with Kay's work. You know, it's a brilliant work, you know, wonderful. Honestly, I wish she comes and join our counselor team, because we have so many women counselors, but none of them, they stand up for us. None of them, they came forward. The women organization, we have few here, they even didn't send a solidarity message, a message of support for us. We were on street being kicked out from the building. Women were crying. The center manager used his hands, even arms, to push women out. Everybody was watching it, and none of them, they came forward. Council is aware of it, and still till date, we have 2 MPs, Emma Hardy, been involved, and she said, oh, she will take notice of it. And she might be in contact with the council as well, but nothing came, you know, so far. So we are on street. So I can talk about my experience in Hull, that if the women have not achieved their basic rights, which is food, clothes, shelter, and house, then what do you expect from a woman like this? She will suffer. She will suffer in silence more and more and more. She will, because she's relying on her husband's income. So the husband, there is no program for the husband, like for the male perpetrators, that they should change their psyche. No psyche or behavioral programs that bring some changes in their psyche. No work is going on BAME, Black and Ethnic Minority Community. So we, the organization, we are working our best to work with these women who are culturally so much sensitive, and because they are not acceptable in wider society, so they have to cling, they have to be connected with their own society, and they have to accept the norms and values of those society, even if they are bad. They have to, because they are not acceptable outside, so they have to be here. So they are isolated completely. And then on the top, when the male is abuser, then they suffer in silence. They think, other women are telling them, oh, where will you go? It's the services, they will take your children away from you, and the services will not treat you as a good mother. So it's better for you to stay here. So this is our program, awareness program. This is what we do with women. We are creating awareness. But the problem is, when the women flee violence and abuse, there is no support available for them. If the support is available, that is very limited. So we are overburdened, you know, because these women who are the victims, they come back to us for support. And the organization cannot support so many women. We need loads and loads of funding and many workers to deal with it. FGM is a big issue. The effect of FGM, those who've been hurt or who are mutilated, the effects are so worse, you know, during their periods time, childbirth, sexual intercourse time, all these effects are there. But the women, they are reluctant to express their and tension, anxiety, and pain to strangers. For them, it's strangers, they think they will take them negative because there is no services working for them to bring them to the wider society. So there is a gap. So really, the work you guys are doing, I think so your area must be wonderful. The council is wonderful and the counselors are wonderful. And people, they look like Kay's work. She brought such a big change in her own area. There was no service available, but she brought it. So we need here, we are talking about it and they are accepting that we are badly needed for the area, for women, but we are still on street. So what can I give you the answer then?
No.
Somebody's just put on the chat that Hull City Council is a White Ribbon accredited council, and I'm looking on the White Ribbon website, and it is a White Ribbon accredited council. You're in Hull, aren't you, Sonia?
Yes.
I think there's a certain amount of shaming needs to happen of Hull City Council, who certainly can't claim to be White Ribbon accredited if they're not looking after victims of domestic violence. Absolutely.
Yeah, because we don't have any BAME strategy. And second thing is, when they talk about empowerment means their white society empowerment. They're talking. So we, as a Black and ethnic minority, we are not classed as ours. We are theirs. You mean so? It is their problem, not ours. These things. So there is a gap between theirs and ours. They don't accept us, so that's why they don't recognize us. They don't want to listen about us. We are on street for the last so many months. And with the support, the Women Equality Party has given us is just wonderful. We need emotional support more than anything else. But like I explained it to you, we have so many women councillors. We have women MPs as well. But who came forward except one Emma Hardy? She said she's just going to speak to the council. And we are just waiting for her reply. But so far, nothing came.
Women, just because they're women, it doesn't mean they care, though, does it? I mean, not all women are feminists.
No.
No.
Maybe you could work with her to actually put together a formal paper to the council, because if papers come, and this is what I've found out with our council, and it's the same in city councils, you might have to jiggle around to get on the agenda, but if you put forward a formal paper and proposal, then the press are in the room, this is a public debate, you literally ask them to vote on specifically, the funding or whatever it is that you need, then those councillors have to stand up and literally be counted. I have voted against, these services. I think, if you have one friendly councillor, if you can just persuade her to take it into the right meeting, then maybe there's some pressure to be borne. Sounds like a nightmare situation, but
I'm really pleased. I've got one eye on the chat, and I'm really pleased that Sonia and myself and a few of the team in Leeds and York have been talking about this, and we've got a plan to support Hull Sisters. We've already done this in North London, in Hackney, supporting Sister Space, who were dealing with exactly the same situation. So we've got a plan. So everyone who's in the chat, watch out. We'll be talking about this. Sinead will be coming back to you for some support as well, because linked in with your press contacts and stuff. But absolutely, we'll take all of those good practice, and we'll stand alongside you, Sonia, and all of the brilliant work that you're doing. I just want to squeeze one last question in before we go, because I think this is a really interesting one. During COVID, so many people are working from home. And employers are normally one of the early warning signs that something's going on, especially around coercive control. So how can we ensure, and how can companies be aware of this? Sinead, I don't know whether you wanted to come in here, because I've got a really good example from Liverpool I wanted to talk about quickly, but Sinead, over to you.
I mean, certainly within our group, we've got a domestic violence lead within the group, and that's a sort of a senior manager level, so that if any of our employees are experiencing domestic abuse or coercive control, they've got someone that they know that they can go and talk to, and that will be dealt with appropriately. So we're obviously very proactive in what we do. So, and we're really proud of that we really do try to create an atmosphere where I think these issues can be talked about, because I think so many times the emphasis on the person who is and the victim at the time. So I think it's about creating work environments that are create the atmosphere where actually it's very open to talk about domestic abuse, coercive control, mental health, because it all links. So I think it's about, if you can create an atmosphere actually that encourages that it's actually the norm, rather than, you know, having like specific days of the year where we have mental health week, we have the 16 days of action. So everybody's frantic. We're all doing things, we're all talking about it. But actually it needs to happen every day. So we've got to create the environment whereby the conversations can take place at any time, when, you know, someone does need support, when they need their employer to really care for them in a different way. So I think for me, it's about creating the right environment whereby this is about on a regular basis, not just on special weeks or days of the year.
Yeah, I think your link to mental health is really good, and I just wanted to share, I know we're running over slightly, but I just want to squeeze an extra minute or two in of people's time. One of the things I was able to implement in Liverpool before I left was there's a domestic abuse workplace champion scheme that's funded by the police commissioner, and basically that's like you have somebody on your HR team or within your team, if you've got a smaller team, who might support around mental health and be sort of a first aider who can help signpost. They do the same for domestic abuse. So they sort of like break down some of the, it's an official training course run by a very experienced domestic violence advocate, so an IDFA. And it's free for all organisations across Merseyside to take part of, and it's tremendous, because you've got to like find all of these different layers for abuse to really end. But we could go on talking all evening. I just wanted to thank both organisations, Hull Sisters and Inspire North. Inspire North, look out for their No Excuse for Abuse campaign and support that. Sinead, I'm sure you'll be back to us with more on this. And Sonia, we will be alongside you. We will be campaigning. You can see what we try to do. Not what we try to do, what we achieve in K Wesley, you know, so it's absolutely fantastic. And also, I'd also like to encourage people, we've got elections coming up next year. Stand as a candidate for the Women's Equality Party, because even just having us on the ballot paper changes the conversations. We're the only party who are committed to talking about this subject and committed to change on it as well. We've also just popped in to the chat box as well, our crowdfunder, because we train activists across the entire country to do this. And if you donate within the next 24 hours, we've got a very, very generous donor who's offering to double your money as well. So please, if you've got any spare cash this side of Christmas, we would really appreciate it. We've also popped in all of the Twitter handles for everyone that you've seen on the call. So all that's left for me is to thank everyone who's joined. And one day we will not be sitting in these virtual rooms or on these rooms, because we will have ended violence against women and girls. It is not inevitable, and we want to thrive in this country. Thank you, everyone.
Hear, hear. Thank you. Bye-bye.